Dear students, so let us continue the discussion of chapter number 2 from operating systems, that is operating system services. So this is my third lecture on the second chapter. So today we'll start the discussion with virtual machines. So already you may be aware of this virtual machine. So as the name itself indicates, virtual machine is nothing but the imitation of the actual physical machine on the system. Means here in most of the times what you want to have is you may want to have the different number of the systems with the different configurations, but most of the time it is not possible, and it is also not recommended to have the different kind of systems of different configurations for the small purposes. It is not affordable also. So that's why in order to solve such problems, or in other words in order to provide the facilities for such applications or such processes, we have the concept of virtual machines. So what is virtual machine? So virtual machine takes the layered approach to its logical conclusion. It treats hardware and the operating system kernel as though they were all the hardware. So virtual machine provides an interface identical to the underlying bare hardware. The operating system host creates the illusion that a process has its own processor and virtual memory. So each guest is provided with a virtual copy of the underlying computer. So this some basics of the virtual machine. So as I told you, so whenever you are working on a computer system, so you know that you are working on a particular computer system, and you know its hardware configuration as well as whatever the operating system or softwares you have. But on the same machine, if you want to have the number of logical machines, okay, so if you want to have the number of logical machines on the same machine which you are using, okay, so that is possible through this virtual machine. Okay, so here as we saw, the virtual machine provides an interface identical to the underlying bare hardware. Means whenever you create a virtual machine, it will be very similar to whatever the physical machine you are using. Okay, so most of the time you will not be able to distinguish whether you are using a virtual machine or a physical machine. Okay, so although the virtual machine will be running on your physical machine, but whatever the interface that is provided by your underlying physical machine, the same will be provided for the virtual machine also. Okay, and here you consider one simple example. Let us consider you are working, you have a Windows operating system on your computer. Okay, but for your lab programs or for your project work, you want to have some other operating system, like you want to install Ubuntu. So the first option is you can have the dual mode of operation, or dual boot of the operating system. So parallel to Windows, you can install the Ubuntu. But again, it depends how much time you want to use that one. So if you want to use it for a very less amount of time, so in that case, instead of installing that on that particular machine, what you can do is by using some suitable softwares, you can create a virtual machine, and in that virtual machine you can install the Ubuntu software. Okay, so all the way what you have to do is you have to start your computer system, and here after that you have to start the software, the application that provides a virtual machine. So in that application you have to open, or you have to start running that Ubuntu operating system. So believe me, whatever the operations that you can perform on a machine, a physical machine, almost all the operations can be performed on the virtual machine. Okay, so that's what here each guest is provided with a virtual copy of the underlying computer. So that's what here. So every guest is being provided with the virtual copy of the underlying hardware here. So next we'll see the virtual machine's history and benefits. So first, commercial virtual machine is developed in 1972 by the IBM mainframes. Okay, so next we'll see the advantages of the virtual machines. So the first advantage is the host system is protected from the virtual machines, just as the virtual machines are protected from each other. Here we saw that you will be having a host system, means whatever the physical machine you have, so on that physical machine you will be having the number of virtual machines. Okay, and here the thing is, the host system will be protected from the virtual machines, just as the one virtual machine will be protected from the another virtual machine. Means here all will be executing independently. So whatever the task that you carry out in one virtual machine, that will not affect the task that are carried out in other virtual machine. In the same way, whatever the task you carry out in virtual machine, this will not affect the task that you carry out in your physical machine. In most of the time, it is going to protect your computer system itself. Means you consider an example, you are running one virtual machine, and in that virtual machine, let us consider that operating system is infected by the virus. So most of the time that virus will be confined to only that virtual machine. It will not affect your physical machine. Okay. So in that case, you have to just remove that virtual machine. So automatically that virus will also be removed. Okay. So in this way, the first one is it is going to provide a protection. So the second advantage is a virtual machine system is a perfect vehicle for operating systems research and development. So at the beginning itself, I told you that whenever the people are doing some research or doing the development, so they want to have the number of systems with different configurations. But physically, it is not possible to have the physical machines of the different configuration. It is going to incur the additional cost, and it will be wastage of money itself. So that's why, so for such applications, this virtual machine plays a very important role. Okay. After this, the third advantage is multiple operating systems can be running on the developer's workstation concurrently. So that's what I told you here. So whenever a developer is developing some application, so at the end of a day, he want his application should be must be portable. It must run on all the different kinds of operating systems. So at the end of a day, he want to test whether the application that he have developed is able to run on the different operating systems or not. So one option is he may have the number of physical machines, each will be having the different operating system. Okay. But here, by using this virtual machine, he can have the number of virtual machines each with a different operating system, and in those virtual machines, he can perform his testing activity. Okay. So this is the third advantage. So the fourth one is virtualized workstation allows for rapid porting and testing of the programs in varying environments. Okay, so it is not only with respect to the operating system. So you consider any environment. Okay, so the testing for testing your applications or the programs in the different environments also, this particular virtual machines can be used. Okay, so this is about the history and the advantages of the virtual machines. So here in this figure, it is clearly given. So how exactly the virtual machines will be created. So in the first figure, we have a non-virtual machine, that is your physical machine, and we know that in your physical machine you have the bare hardware. So hardware is having the kernel, the operating system part, and after that we have the number of processes. So here on this particular device or the computer system, when you create the number of virtual machines, so how exactly it will look. So here we have the machine which is having the 3 virtual machines. So see, the hardware remains same. You will not do any changes with hardware. Okay, on the existing hardware itself, you are going to create the virtual machines. So here the hardware remains as it is, and above this we have virtual machine implementation. So as a part of kernel, so we have the virtual machine implementation. So when you implement the virtual machines, so we have the 3 different virtual machines, that is VM1, VM2 and VM3. So we know that on each virtual machine we will be installing the different operating system. So that's why here on each virtual machine we have its own kernel. Okay, so here also we have the kernel, here also we have the kernel, here also we have the kernel. Along with this, each virtual machine will have their own processes. So in this way the virtual machine will be there. So after this we'll see the implementation of the virtual machine. So as we saw, the virtual machine is going to give you a copy of the physical system. Okay. So whatever the activities or whatever the operations or the services that are available on the physical machine, all should be available on the virtual machine also. So that's why implementing virtual machine is not an easy task. So much of the work is required to provide an exact duplicate of the underlying machine. Okay. So the virtual machine software can run in kernel mode since it is the operating system. So in the previous slide itself we saw that the virtual machine software will be running in the kernel mode. Okay, because here itself we are going to create the virtual machines. So the virtual machine itself can execute in only user mode, just as the physical machine has two modes. However, so must be the virtual machine. So we know that the operating system is having the dual mode of operation. It works in two modes, that is user mode and kernel mode. And we know that the virtual machine software is present in the kernel mode, but when you start running a virtual machine, the virtual machine will be running in the user mode. Means here we know that whatever the physical machine we have, the physical machine is having two modes of operation, that is user mode and kernel mode. So we expect the virtual machine, whatever you create, so that virtual machine should also be having these two modes of operations, such as the virtual user mode and the virtual kernel mode. Okay, so here those actions that cause a transfer from user mode to the kernel mode on a real machine must also cause a transfer from the virtual user mode to the virtual kernel mode on a virtual machine. So here we consider an example how exactly the transfer will take place from virtual user mode to virtual kernel mode whenever there is a request to move from the user mode to the kernel mode on the physical system. Okay, so when the request will come to move from kernel mode to user mode, user mode to kernel mode, whenever you call a system call. Okay, so let us consider here. So when a system call is made by a program running on a virtual machine in virtual user mode, it will cause a transfer to the virtual machine monitor in the real machine. How exactly it will be done? So let us consider you are running one application in the virtual user mode, and this virtual user mode you will call a particular system call. Okay, and we know that whenever a system call is called, so that system call is going to execute in the kernel mode. So here the execution pointer should transfer from this mode, that is virtual user mode, to the virtual kernel mode. For that, what it will do, so whenever in the virtual user mode a particular program calls the system call, so it is going to transfer that to the virtual machine monitor. So on your system, on the real system, we have something called virtual machine monitor, which is going to maintain or monitor or control the virtual machines running. Okay, so this virtual machine monitor will issue this request to change the mode from virtual user mode to the virtual kernel mode. So in this case, what this virtual machine monitor will do is, the virtual machine monitor gains control. It can change the register contents and program counter for the virtual machine to simulate the effect of the system call. So here what it will do, in order to perform this transfer, what it will do, it is going to change the register contents and program counter so that it can simulate the effect of the system call on the virtual machine. So after this, it is going to simply restart the virtual machine, so that after restart, the virtual machine will start running in the virtual kernel mode. So in this way, the transfer will take place from virtual user mode to the virtual kernel mode whenever a program running in the virtual user mode calls a system call. After this, we have the example of virtual machine. So on most of the Windows systems, in order to create the virtual machines, you can use this software or application. It is VMware. It's freely available. You can use it. So here we'll see how exactly this VMware is implemented, the architecture of this VMware. So we know that we have at the bottom part we have the hardware. Hardware means it is having the CPU, memory and IO devices. And above this hardware we have the host operating system. So it may be Linux operating system or Windows operating system. And above this we have the virtualization layer. So this virtualization layer is going to create the virtual machines. So here also we have created 3 virtual machines. So the first, second and third. So along with these virtual machines, so this real machine will be having its own applications also. Okay. So here again each virtual machine will be having the different configuration. Like here you can consider in this virtual machine we have the guest operating system as a FreeBSD. In the second virtual machine we have the guest operating system as Windows NT. On the third operating system we have the guest operating system as Windows XP. Okay, so on all the three virtual machines we have the 3 different operating systems. So here each virtual machine will have its own virtual CPU, virtual memory, and virtual devices. So in this way, the VMware architecture will be there. So after this, we'll have one more virtual machine that is provided by Java. It is a JVM, that is Java Virtual Machine. So the Java Virtual Machine, we know that it is having the Java program, it is .class files, Java APIs .class files. So this will be here we have the actual part. Here we have the class files loader. So after that we have the Java interpreter, which will convert a class file into the object code, that is byte code, and that byte code will be executed on the host systems. So that's what we know, that the Java portability is available because the program, whatever the .class file is there, so this will be converted into the byte code. So that byte code can run on almost all the different platforms. So because of this, it is possible to achieve the portability by the Java programs. So after that, the last one, we have the operating system generation from this chapter. So the operating systems are designed to run on any class of machines. So the system must be configured for each specific computer site. So we know that the operating systems will be designed to run on any class of machines. So these are independent of the hardware. On all the different types of hardwares, the operating system should run, and it must automatically configure for specific to that particular hardware. So for that thing, we have the three important components of the operating system here, that is sysgen, booting, and bootstrap program. So what is this sysgen? So sysgen is a program. It obtains the information concerning the specific configuration of the hardware system. Because we know that whenever you install the operating system on a particular hardware, the operating system should automatically make the changes in order to suit itself to that particular hardware. So that's why that is carried out by the sysgen program. So the sysgen program obtains the information of the underlying hardware and specific configuration details, so that the operating system will be working on that particular hardware. So the second one is booting. So we know that whenever you start your computer system, the operating system will be loaded from the memory, from the secondary storage into the memory, so that your computer will start execution. That is, the computer, it is going to load the kernel. So after that, the third one is bootstrap program. Already we have discussed this. So bootstrap program is a special program, so which is responsible for starting your computer system. So whenever you start your computer system, so first program that starts execution is a bootstrap program. So usually this bootstrap program will be embedded on a ROM, so that the user cannot change the content of this bootstrap program. So this bootstrap program will be knowing where the location of the kernel or the operating system code in order to boot that. So that's why whenever you start your computer system, so first this bootstrap program will start execution, and this will be knowing where exactly your kernel is, and it is going to locate the kernel. It will load it into the memory, and it starts its execution. So this is about operating system generation. So last we have the system boot. So how exactly the system is going to boot? So an operating system must be available, must be made available to the hardware, so hardware can start it. So the small piece of code, that is bootstrap loader, locates the kernel, loads it into memory, and starts it. Already we saw this. So sometimes along with this bootstrap loader, we have something called boot block. Okay, so it's a two-step process. So in this case, the boot block at a fixed location loads the bootstrap loader. So we know that whenever you start your computer system, the bootstrap program starts execution, but on some machines we have the two-step process where the boot block will be there. This boot block will load the bootstrap program, and this bootstrap loader will load the kernel. Okay, so this is also possible. So when power initialized on a system, so execution starts at a fixed memory location, and we know that after that the execution will be continued. So here the firmware is used to hold the initial boot code. So that's what here on the usually the whatever that bootstrap program is there, it is loaded on the ROM, so that it will not be changed by the normal user. Okay, so this is about the system boot. Okay, so with this we completed the second chapter from this first module, that is operating system. Thank you.